T-Gotchi, Martyr, Secret Ending. If you're a fan of the classic Tamagotchi games, and a horror fan like me, then I'm pretty sure you must have heard about a Tamagotchi-based horror game known as T-Gotchi. I'm pretty sure a majority of Tamagotchi fans and horror fans are aware of this game. But for those of you who don't know what T-Gotchi is, I'll give an explanation. T-Gotchi is a Tamagotchi-themed horror game that was released on August 8th of 2020 by Garage Heathen that involves the player raising and caring for a green-colored anime girl. The game has a total of 8 different endings, including a secret 9th ending that occurs if you feed your T-Gotchi anime girl 100 times in a row. The game may seem like a simple Tamagotchi ripoff at first, with the difference being that you care for an anime girl instead of an alien animal. But as you proceed through the game, you'll find that it isn't as innocent as it looks. A good majority of the endings mostly involves your T-Gotchi dying in rather unsettling ways. Some involving suicide or death by starvation. I never really understood why this was, until I read a post on itch.io by the game creator himself, and that's where I found the answer as to why every ending was so dark and depressing. Garage Heathen himself stated that the intention behind the game was to show how little power you have as an actual player, basically to leave you feeling unsatisfied. And I can tell you all that the game definitely succeeded in doing just that. One of the most unsatisfying and intriguing endings that got my attention, however, was the Martyr ending of the game. In T-Gotchi, the Martyr ending of the game can be achieved if the player refuses to feed, wash, or speak to the anime girl in the game. It's similar to the silent ending, but with an interesting twist that got me intrigued at the time. Unlike the other endings, the Martyr ending has only 4 days in total, with day 4 being called The Day. On day 1, the anime girl becomes worried over the fact that no one is there to feed, wash, or even speak to her. It's not too interesting, but from then on, weird things start happening. On day 2, the anime girl can be seen sitting down in the background, looking depressed. Then she starts babbling about someone she calls Daddy. This unseen character is first mentioned when the T-Gotchi girl says the following line: "Oh hey, it's a new day, but no one's here, just like Daddy said." The mention of the so-called Daddy got me intrigued at the time, and I was desperate to know more. After that line is spoken, the anime girl then says that Daddy told her that the lonesome days would come, and then describes hearing the sounds of electricity cracking, wind and dry trees, seeing blue flashes like flares, and catching views of the sycamore forest in the darkness below, along with smelling ozone in the air. If this wasn't interesting enough, day 3 would only serve to arouse my curiosity even further. On the beginning of day 3, the anime girl says that she spoke with Daddy today, and that he's coming to take her back, then states that he came at night, like he always did, speaking with a kind and sweet voice like always. At the time I wondered if maybe this game was building up to something, but a lot of what this girl was saying didn't make sense. Day 4 was when I was greeted with probably one of the most interesting endings of the game so far. After the title screen titled The Day vanished, the scene opened up to show my T-Gotchi standing in complete black, brief flashes of light, and what appeared to be sparks flying around every few seconds. It reminded me of a welding torch and the sound of electricity crackling, just like the anime girl had mentioned on day 2. I could also hear what sounded like wind blowing in the background, but I didn't see any trees. The girl then slowly walks towards the source of the flashing light and the crackling sounds, calling out to her, "Daddy," and telling him that she's coming. After walking completely off screen and out of sight, the game ends right there, and you're sent back to the title screen. Out of all the other endings of the game, that was probably the most interesting ending of all. Yet, I was never given an answer as to what exactly the ending was supposed to imply. I had 2 theories on a possible answer to this mystery, but I'd never truly know if either of them were true. The first theory I had was that the daddy character was a computer programmer that had placed the soul of his daughter inside a computer program as a test to interact with game players all around the world, but ultimately decided to bring her back into the real world once it was clear that no one was caring for her, thus declaring the project a failure. The second possible theory I had was that the girl had died before the game even began, and she was in purgatory, awaiting judgment from above, and this daddy character was supposedly the girl's guardian angel, coming to guide her to heaven. I know, these theories seemed pretty insane, but they were the only ones I could come up with. After playing the game and achieving all the other endings, including the secret ending, I had decided to just forget about T-Gotchi and move on. However, the Martyr ending always stuck out in the back of my mind, and I was forever left with one question that I could never get out of my mind. What did the ending imply? And why was it called Martyr? I felt as though I'd never find the answer to that one question. That is, until that one fateful day, on January 10th of 2021, the pandemic was still raging as bad as ever, and I ended up having to file for unemployment because of it, giving me more at-home time. It was a bit frustrating that I lost my job as a Lowe's forklifter due to the pandemic. It was really frustrating that I lost my job as a Lowe's forklifter due to the pandemic, and a bit disappointing since I really enjoyed that job. I had started working there 5 years ago at age 21, but I never thought I'd lose it due to some virus going around, but I digress. My parents worked as nurses at our local hospital, and as you can imagine, they always had their hands full since the place was practically jam-packed every day due to the pandemic. This meant I'd be home alone a lot more often, but I honestly didn't mind. It felt good to have some peace and quiet once in a while. At about 11 in the afternoon, I was feeling a bit bored and decided to do some horror games on my gaming laptop. Once I switched it on, I found that I had a Gmail from my best friend Jeffrey. He was a horror fan like me and had been my friend since first grade. Curious, I opened the Gmail to see what Jeffrey had to say. Here is what the Gmail said. "Hey Todd, remember that game you played last year called T-Gotchi? Well, I just played it again for some nostalgia and found something interesting. Remember how you've always wanted to know more about the Martyr ending, like what its meaning was and such? Well, I just found something interesting that may provide you with the answers to all your questions regarding that. Turns out, there's a secret extended ending to the Martyr ending, but you need a cheat code in order to achieve it. Well, as it turns out, I found the cheat code on a Reddit post centered around T-Gotchi and I downloaded it. I haven't seen the extended ending myself yet, but I thought since you're so eager for answers on the Martyr ending, I'd send you the cheat code so you could see the extended ending for yourself. I've sent you the cheat code and the instructions on how to apply it to the T-Gotchi game in a zip file. Just unzip the file and go for it. After reading the whole Gmail, I was pumped with excitement. I have always been eager for answers to some of the questions I had regarding T-Gotchi, and I finally had that chance now. I checked the rest of the Gmail and found a zip file labeled T-Gotchi Extended Secret Martyr Ending. I unzipped the folder using WinRAR and found 2 files inside it. One was a cheat code file labeled TGSME, and the other was a file labeled T-Gotchi Cheat Manual. I opened the manual file first and read the instructions on what to do. Turns out, in order to apply the cheat code, all I had to do was drag the TGSME file into the main T-Gotchi game file, and the code would be applied automatically. It also mentioned for that cheat code to work, I would have to achieve all the other endings of the game before doing the Martyr ending. I dragged that cheat file into the game file, and the T-Gotchi game booted up automatically. I was brought up to the familiar title screen with the egg-shaped Tamagotchi-style select screen. I knew what to do at this point, so I selected New Game and began playing. Feeling a rush of nostalgia went through me as the game began. Interacting with that cute green anime girl always filled me with joy, yet I knew that it would be short-lived. This was a horror-themed game after all, and I knew what came afterwards. I honestly felt horrible having to achieve the bad ending to the game. You know, the one that you achieve when you deliberately abuse your T-Gotchi anime girl by not feeding or washing her. These endings involve her dying through starvation or suicide. I tried reminding myself it was just virtual reality, and that I'm not really hurting anyone. But it still felt wrong in a lot of ways. This game really knows how to make the player feel guilty and powerless, and it certainly made me feel that way. Eventually, I completed all the other endings of the game, and was now down to just the Martyr ending. I felt my chest starting to hammer with excitement as I began playing the final part of the game. I'd finally get the answer I'd been searching for all this time. Out of excitement, I hit a few keys on my keyboard and opened Xshare by accident, which automatically began recording the gameplay. I didn't mind though, and continued playing the game. At the time I didn't know, but the gameplay recording would become very essential in what would soon follow afterwards. Once the game started on day 1, I was greeted by a new anime girl, whose name was apparently Miku. Nothing seemed too out of the ordinary at first, but I noticed that the girl's dialogue was slightly different than usual. After I failed to respond when she asked for food and a shower, normally the T-Gotchi girl would say something along the lines of, "Is this finally it?" But instead Miku then said, "Why bother? It's not like any of the other previous owners cared about the others like me, so why should I be any different?" That was a bit odd, but not too out of the ordinary. This game has several fourth wall break implications, so I didn't find this too odd. In the final ending, the T-Gotchi girl states that she knows about the others before her, then asks the player what they were trying to accomplish by not giving up. I got the implication that this dialogue meant something similar, but I couldn't be sure. My T-Gotchi Miku then asked, "Why was I brought here? What's my purpose for existing if misery is my destiny?" This was clearly new dialogue, and that piqued my curiosity even further. The first day on the path to the secret ending was a bit longer than usual. More dialogue was said than the day ended. I was already intrigued at this new dialogue and wanted to know more. Day 2 began, and the screen opened with Miku sitting down, looking glum. The facial expressions of your T-Gotchi girl never really changes, so you're only able to tell what she's feeling by her level of mood, dialogue, and body language. I could clearly tell that Miku was upset, because her mood meter was close to empty, and she was sitting down in a depressed manner. She began to speak after a few seconds. "It's a new day, but no one's here." "No one but me," Miku began. "Am I truly destined to suffer? Why did Daddy put me here to suffer, at the mercy of selfish humans like the others before me?" 3 options for speaking popped up in the top far right of the screen. "You're nothing more than a program we humans created. No one cares about you," and "I choose to say nothing." And Miku grew even more anxious. "I guess I truly am alone here. Hi, Daddy. Why did you put me here if you knew I was going to suffer? Moreover, why even create the others?" Miku asked aloud. I assumed that Miko was referring to the other T-Gotchi anime girls before her, and I began wondering if maybe this Daddy was supposedly the game's creator. The food and hygiene meter was down to almost empty, yet Miku continued to babble on about how she was all alone and didn't know what to do. Most of what she said wasn't too important or out of the usual, but one line she said before the day ending stuck out. "Human beings are selfish, arrogant, and cruel. It's a wonder they've even survived this long without destroying each other. Look at the chaos they've created throughout the ages: wars, famine, weapons of mass destruction. It's a miracle they didn't destroy each other during the Cold War. I guess it isn't too strange that I'd be left alone to suffer here, given how selfish and arrogant humans are," Miku babbled. That really caught me off guard. While it was clear at this point that this new Martyr Ending had new dialogue, what my T-Gotchi girl just said really bothered me. The part about human beings being violent and cruel was something I clearly wasn't expecting. Why was Miko bringing up references to wars, famine, and nuclear weapons? Those questions lingered on my mind as Day 2 ended. Once Day 3 began, Miku was still sitting on the ground in the same position as before, looking just as glum as ever. The food, hygiene, and mood meter were completely empty now. I chose to say nothing once the 3 choices appeared in the top right screen. And Miku spoke. I heard Daddy speak to me the other night. I asked him why I was put here, but he said nothing. At least not at first. After I asked again, he simply said that all this was a test. Daddy left me after that, not even telling me what he meant, Miku said. I wondered what Miku meant by that, about the game supposedly being a test. I honestly didn't know what Miku meant by that, but I figured that more answers to my ever-growing questions would be provided as the game progressed. Miku dipped her head lower and spoke once more. I remember those days, yes. It's coming back to me now. I couldn't remember much before, but I remember now. The forest of sycamore and the city. Why does the city seem so familiar? I don't know why, but it feels as though I've been there before. Were there others before me that know the city? Miku said. I was beginning to grow unnerved by everything Miko just said. I clearly remember the sycamore forests being mentioned in the original path to the Martyr Ending, but the part Miko said about the city and how it seemed familiar to her began to bother me. What city was she referring to? And why did it seem familiar to her? I know that this was only a game, but why did everything Miku just said make me feel so unnerved? That was a question that I had no answer to, and it only got more strange from there. I remember the smell of burning ozone, crackles of electricity, sparks flying, in the city. What city was it again? I can't remember which one. I wish Daddy would just tell me. Why these memories seem so familiar, Miku said. Day 3 ended after that line. Day 4 was probably the strangest one yet. Miku was now lying on her side, looking even more depressed than ever. She began speaking again after a few seconds passed, and these next several lines would forever alter my view on humanity and the game entirely. I remember now, Miku began. I remember everything. Daddy brought me here against my will, and he did the same to the others before me. He told me the truth last night. Daddy said we were his attempt at trying to create something more than just an RPG character. Me and the others. Miku paused and buried her face in her hands, as if sobbing. Then she continued. We were used. All used. Daddy said we were meant to be humanity's first intelligent AI. And this game was all a test for just that. And me and the others were his test subjects, to be used inside this game. But we're not game characters. We were human once. At this point I was deeply disturbed. What Miku was saying really began to scare me, and not in a good way. I began to put some things together in my mind that I hadn't thought of before, but what Miku said next confirmed my theories. And Daddy told me that he had no choice. He never meant to hurt us, but he kidnapped us and placed us all here, Miku began. He ripped us apart from our bodies and transferred our consciousness into this game and wiped our memories in the process. At first, Daddy wondered why I started remembering things about my past, back before he put me here in this game, but then he told me that the memory wiping process wasn't foolproof and that there were still flaws. Daddy said the others before me remembered things about their past owners and their lives as humans. I was beyond shocked at what I was reading. What Miku was saying sounded beyond insane and almost downright impossible. After pondering over everything she had just said, I began to piece together one frightening theory that seemed crazy, but possibly accurate, given the seriousness of the situation. Was it possible that Miku and all the other T-Gotchi girls were real human beings who had lost their consciousness, removed by the game's creator, and placed in a simulated environment as some sort of test in creating an intelligent AI? The idea sounded absolutely crazy, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Yet I couldn't understand how something like that was even possible. To remove a human's consciousness from their body and place it in a simulated environment would require use of technology that I was pretty sure didn't exist in this current time and age. As advanced as we were in this current day and age, I knew for a fact that humanity was at least a century away from achieving something that advanced. As I pondered these thoughts, Miku glanced up at the screen and looked directly at me. I'm not a tool to be used. I'm human, just as the others were before me. But you killed them out of sick curiosity, Miku said, her eyes now squinted in what I assume was anger. Do you have any idea how many innocent people have suffered inside this place? Daddy kidnapped them and put them in here, and we've all suffered because of it, including me. At this point, I just wanted the game to end. This was beginning to sound a lot more insane than I could have ever anticipated. If you don't believe me, then I'll just show you myself, Miku said, then reached into the back of her green shirt and pulled something out. And to my surprise, it was what appeared to be a small tablet that resembled an iPad. Miku held it up to where the screen faced me, and the screen zoomed in to the point where only the iPad screen could be seen. What I saw in it would disturb me for all time to come. The screen switched on, and revealed a real-life scene of what looked like a high-tech laboratory room with several medical beds. Lined up against the right wall, there were 5 in total. On each of these beds were what appeared to be 5 teenage girls in white hospital gowns, unconscious and bound in chains by their wrists and ankles. They were also hooked up to what I presumed were life support systems. There were tubes hooked up to respiratory systems, which ran down the throats of each girl, and they had IV needles inserted into their forearms, which ran from an IV bag containing some sort of blue liquid. Heart monitors were also hooked up to the girls, which monitor their heartbeats and vital signs. From what I can tell, these girls appeared to be of Asian descent, possibly Korean, Japanese, or Chinese. Several men in white lab coats placed these strange metal head caps on their heads, which had several cables running from them over to what looked like a large supercomputer on the other side of the room. There, in front of the supercomputer, was another man in a lab coat, typing on a keyboard in front of a massive computer screen. The screen displayed what looked like the statuses of each of the girls' life signs. Are they fully prepped and sedated for the procedure? The man at the supercomputer asked the other two men who were near the medical beds. They're ready, Dr. Heathen, the man said. The man near the last medical bed informed. The man just addressed him as Dr. Heathen. I felt my heart nearly skip a beat when I heard that name being mentioned. That was the last name of the T-Gotchi game creator, Garage Heathen himself. As my mind raced over everything Miku had just said, and as I gazed upon those 5 sedated girls on the medical beds, everything started to make sense now. I felt sick as I realized just what I was looking at. Miku had stated that she and several others had been placed into the game against their will by the one she called Daddy, who I now knew to be the game's creator, who was also the man sitting in front of the supercomputer. Good. We should be able to proceed without any problems, Dr. Heathen replied. Once the brain alterations have been made and their memories have been wiped, we can finally begin the test. The game should be ready for release next month. All I need now are the souls of these girls to complete it. I nearly heaved the contents of my stomach upon hearing that part. I honestly wanted to believe that this was all some horrible nightmare, but I knew better. This was all very real. It was happening right before my eyes. I watched this heathen typed out a bunch of commands on the keyboard. Then the screen changed to reveal several of the green T-Gotchi anime girls hovering in the midst of black and several rectangular squares near the top of the big screen. Their eyes were closed, as if they were all asleep. Dr. Heathen typed in a command, and I heard a mechanical voice say, "Initiating memory wipe of subjects 1 through 5. The scene flipped back over to the medical beds, where I then saw several lights flashing on the head caps, followed by strange buzzing sounds emanating from them. The girls' bodies trembled a bit as the process began. Then they went still shortly after. I wanted to stop watching this madness unfolding right before my eyes, but I couldn't. As much as I was tempted to just shut this game off and never touch it again, I wanted to know how it could end. I already had a feeling it wasn't going to be anything pleasant. Not after everything that had happened so far, but I had to know how it would end. I had come so far to find the answers to T-Gotchi that I had craved for months, and I would see this through to the end. Memory wiping complete. All systems go for soul transfer procedures. Ready to activate, the computer's mechanical voice reported. I then watched as Dr. Heathen tapped several keys on the keyboard, and the lights on the head caps on all the girls glowed a bright green color. Shortly thereafter, the T-Gotchi girls on the supercomputer screen suddenly opened their eyes and looked around, clearly confused. I expected more to happen, but then the screen went black, and then I watched as Miku pulled the tablet back and placed it back in her skirt. Now you know the truth. Those were the first ones that fell victim to Daddy, but more soon followed, before the game made its release a month later, and I was one of them, Miku said. None of us could remember our past lives. or at least a few remembered brief flickers of their past lives. Daddy quickly fixed that by performing another brainwashing procedure on them. But I was different than the others. Unlike the other girls, I was able to remember everything, and Daddy saw me as a threat because of it. To try and cover his tracks, Daddy hid this version of the Martyr Ending somewhere on the dark web, in hopes of no one would ever find out the truth. But it seems he failed. You now know the truth, and because of that, your life is now in danger. I felt a brief tingle of fear when she said that. I honestly didn't know what Miku meant by saying my life was in danger, but after everything I'd just experienced, I wouldn't put any of it past me at that point. Daddy knows. Whatever T-Gotchi knows, he knows. The data received by my kind are transferred directly to his lab, including mine. He knows everything you've just seen. You shouldn't have added this cheat into your game. Now he knows. Daddy knows your real name, where you live, and who your family members are. You must run and hide. You must try. Miku was cut off by abrupt static. The screen went black. The screen stayed black for a few seconds. Then red text appeared in the center of the black screen and said, "The truth." I instantly realized that this must be the alternate Martyr Ending, and I had a feeling that I wasn't going to like whatever I was about to see. I couldn't be more right. The screen opened up to reveal what looked like a large city at night. And upon closer inspection, I realized that it looked like Japan, since many of the neon signs were written in Japanese lettering. The screen wiggled back and forth, as if someone were filming it through a phone camera, and I soon realized that it was indeed a phone camera, since the view swung around to face a Japanese teen girl who looked to be about 16 or 17. She was wearing one of those cat girl cosplay outfits, and she was posing in front of what I assumed to be an arcade of some sort. "Nice pose, Harumi-chan," a man's voice said. I assumed that the man who said that was the one holding the camera. I also noticed that his accent didn't sound Japanese. It sounded American. This made me assume that whoever this person with the phone was, either was someone visiting Japan, or a foreigner who was living there. I wasn't exactly sure where this was going, but I knew it had something to do with the T-Gotchi game, given the fact that this ending was named The Truth. "Thanks, Mr. Heathen," the girl named Harumi replied in rather perfect English. As soon as I heard her say the name Heathen, I instantly felt my heart jump in shock. It was him, the creator of T-Gotchi. I wondered just what in the world he was doing in Japan, but I'd soon find out. "Hey, Harumi, I know an excellent spot for a perfect shot. Follow me there." Heathen then beckoned Harumi to follow him. I watched as the camera began swiveling, as Heathen began moving down a long sidewalk, and I could also hear who I assumed was Harumi following after him. The two of them headed towards a large forest area, and eventually came to a large shrine a few minutes after. The shrine had a statue of what appeared to be a fox with 9 tails, sitting on top of a large pedestal, and I heard Heathen tell Harumi to pose in front of the fox statue in a flying position. "Try posing with your eyes shut. That'll make the shot much more better," Heathen said. I watched as Harumi stood in a flying pose and shut her eyes, and that's when things took a very twisted turn. I watched Heathen rush forward, dropping the phone on the ground as he did so, causing the camera to face the night sky. Because of this, I couldn't see what was going on, but I could hear Harumi yelling out in shock. I also heard sounds of struggling, then silence, and then the phone was picked back up. For a brief moment, I saw Harumi now lying on the ground unconscious with a hypodermic needle in the side of her neck. Then the screen went black. A new scene appeared on the screen about 5 seconds later, and I now saw Harumi on one of those medical beds in this strange lab I saw earlier. He then came up and placed one of those metal head caps on Harumi's head, then walked off screen. I then heard him say, "It's a real shame things had to end this way, my dear. However, I must ensure that my experiment succeeds. You won't remember anything from your past life, not even your own name, but I shall grant you a new one for your new life. Perhaps Miku will suffice." I felt my spine run cold when I heard him say that name. The same name as the T-Gotchi girl who revealed everything about the other T-Gotchis before her. Harumi, I realized. That was Miko's real name, before her consciousness was placed into the game. As I took in everything that had just unfolded before me, the screen went black again. It stayed black for about 10 seconds. Then that Oni-like face with the 2 long tusks that appears when you begin a new game, and after your T-Gotchi dies, appeared and began speaking. What it said was unsettling. "It seems you stumbled upon that which you had no business seeing. You were unwise to go snooping around in this game for secrets that you never should have seen, and you will soon pay the price for it. The creator of this game has been notified, and will soon be along to deal with you. Don't try to run, and don't try calling for help. There's nowhere on earth you can hide from him." The game then automatically crashed and closed itself after that message was shown. I honestly didn't know what to do at this point. The sheer magnitude and horror of what I had just discovered would forever haunt me as long as I lived. Never in my wildest dreams did I think something so dark and sinister like what I had just seen could actually happen in real life. But it had happened, and I didn't know what to do. I thought about notifying the police or the FBI what I had found, but I knew they'd never believe me if I told them what I had just seen. I hadn't thought to take screenshots or record any of the gameplay. But then I suddenly remembered accidentally opened up Xshare and recording the gameplay. I opened up Xshare, and sure enough, it had recorded a long video of everything I had seen and witnessed. I saved the video to a flash drive to use as evidence. Then I texted Jeffrey and told him what I had found. But I got no response. Tried calling him, but the same thing happened. I got no response. I tried 5 more times, and then I gave up. I knew at this point that something was very wrong. Jeffrey never took this long to answer a call or a text. I remember what Miku or Harumi had said to me about Heathen knowing everything she knew, and that really bothered me. Did the creator of T-Gotchi really know everything that I had just seen? I didn't honestly know how that was possible, but considering the fact that Heathen had technology that was capable of placing a human's consciousness into virtual reality, I wouldn't deny the possibility of him somehow being able to spy on every activity in the game. If that was true, then I knew I'd be in terrible danger. Heathen would most likely try to kill me to cover up his horrible secret, or the very worst, place my consciousness in the game as well. Was it also possible that Heathen knew Jeffrey had found that cheat code, which revealed his horrible secret? I wasn't sure, but given the fact that he wasn't answering his phone told me that something was wrong. I tried calling his home phone, which didn't work either, so I decided to head down to the police station to show them what I had found. I quickly jumped inside my small Toyota Yaris and sped down to the police station. Once I got there, I explained everything I had seen in T-Gotchi and also showed them the evidence on the flash drive that I had had. At first the cops took most of it as a joke, but when they saw the parts where Miku showed the evidence of Galish Heathen's experiments, the cops became very concerned. I even saw one of them point out one of the girls on the medical tables and say something along the lines of, "Isn't that one of the young women that we got a missing persons report on several months ago?" When the final part of the game called The Truth was shown, along with the warning that creepy Oni face gave me after witnessing Harumi's horrible fate, the cops took me very seriously, and even said they recognized a few of the women from several missing persons reports they had gotten many months back. What was even more unsettling was that the police also told me they had lost contact with the family members of the missing women several days after they went missing, because they had no leads or any clues as to where they were or where they had gone. The cases eventually went cold. However, with this new evidence I had provided, the police now had leads to help them solve this case. I also told them about Jeffrey not responding to my calls or texts, and that I feared Heathen may have had something to do with it. The cops assured me that they'd send a few officers to check on him, and also informed me that they'd send a few unmarked police cars near my house to keep watch in case Heathen really intended to come down and harm me and my family. I headed home a while later, where my parents were waiting for me. They had been notified by the police of what I had found, and demanded that I show them the proof, just to prove this wasn't all some sick joke. I complied, and showed my parents the gameplay recording, and needless to say, they were both horrified by what they saw. I also told my parents that the police would be sending a few unmarked police cars down near our house to ensure no one came to harm us. I also tried calling Jeffrey a few more times, but still got no response. Several hours later, I got a call from the police station and received horrifying news. Several officers had gone down to Jeffrey's house to check up on him, and found that the front door of his house had been completely smashed open, torn off the hinges, and laying on the front entranceway door. When the officers searched his house, they found both of Jeffrey's parents dead. His father was lying in the upstairs hallway floor with several bullet holes in the side of his head, and his mother was lying dead in the bathroom with fatal gunshots as well. Jeffrey was nowhere to be found, and the police assumed he had most likely been kidnapped. Another thing that they noticed was that a handgun was found next to Jeffrey's dad, with his fingerprints on it, which told the police that he most likely had been trying to fight off whatever intruders had been in the house. The police also informed me that due to the severity of all the evidence I had given them, the FBI were now involved in this investigation as well. They were now fully convinced that T-Gotchi was involved with the disappearances of those Asian girls, along with Jeffrey. Thankfully, no one came to my house that night, so I felt relieved. A few days later, the FBI informed my family that T-Gotchi's creator, T-Gotchi, had been arrested after they found a ton of evidence in his home involving illegal human experimentation. As for Jeffrey's disappearance, it turned out that Heathen was involved in that as well. As it turned out, Heathen had tracked Jeffrey's IP address when he downloaded that cheat code and sent it to me. Fearing him to be a potential witness, Heathen sent several hired henchmen to Jeffrey's house to abduct him and bring him back to Heathen's secret lab under his house, where he'd be used as another one of his experiments to ensure he stayed quiet for good. When the FBI raided Heathen's underground lab, they freed Jeffrey from one of the machines he was hooked up to and sent him to the hospital. They also found the same girls I saw in the T-Gotchi game, still laying on the medical tables, hooked up to life support systems, and one of them was Harumi. Turns out they'd all been held captive in that place for several months, hooked up to life support systems as Heathen tried to perfect the brainwashing on their minds to ensure that they became completely assimilated into the T-Gotchi game. The girls were all rushed to the hospital upon liberation, but a few didn't make it since they were too far gone. I learned later that Harumi and Jeffrey were the only ones who recovered successfully. Jeffrey was released a few days after he checked out fine, and his aunt and uncle took custody of him due to his parents being dead at the hands of Heathen's henchmen. As for Harumi, she didn't actually live in the United States, but was actually from Japan. Heathen had visited Japan overseas several months ago, and had kidnapped her, as I witnessed in the game, and brought her back to the US to be used as other human avatar in the T-Gotchi game. She had also been able to recall all her experiences in the game as Miku, which provided the FBI with a lot more evidence against Heathen's evil deeds than the evidence I had given the police, and with all the testimonies of Harumi and Jeffrey, the courts condemned Heathen to life in prison without parole or bail. Harumi returned home to Japan afterwards to her family. The story soon made it in the morning news, and everyone knew the truth of what had really been going on behind the scenes of T-Gotchi. As for the T-Gotchi game itself, it was seized by the FBI and removed from the internet until further notice. It's been over a month since all this took place, and I still have nightmares about what I had witnessed on that game. While T-Gotchi had seemed like an amazing game, I could never look at it the same way ever again, and I doubt anyone else would either. All I can say is this: don't ever take anything for granted, because they may not be as pleasant as you think.